Hello! In this video, we're going to create our first game inside of Unreal Engine. It's going to be based and inspired on the Wipeout game show. So we're going to design and create a bunch of obstacles which the player is going to have to get past, and if the player is hit by any of these obstacles, then they're going to play a ragdoll animation. To get started, you want to open up the Unreal Project browser. You can do this by launching Unreal Engine, then go to the game section and select the third person template. We're going to be creating our game based off this template. For the project name, call it Wipeout because the game we're going to be creating is going to be based on the Total Wipeout show. Once you've done all of this, just click create and it will load up our project. Once the project loads, it should look something like this, and if I click play, I should be able to play the game as the third person mannequin character. So in the Total Wipeout game show, the player has to avoid obstacles, otherwise they'll be hit off the Wipeout course. So the first thing we're going to do is create some obstacles for our player character to avoid. We're also going to make it so that if the player character hits one of these obstacles, they're going to do a cool ragdoll physics animation. So the first thing we're actually going to set up is the ragdoll feature for our player character. So to do that, we just want to go to the content drawer. This will allow us to view all of the files inside of our project. And we're going to go to the third person folder, go to blueprints, and open up the third person character. This is what we're playing the game as. Just open it up and go over to the viewport. This will allow us to see how our third person character is. And we just want to select the mesh and scroll down. And we want to go to collision presets and just change this to be ragdoll. This will allow our character to do some ragdoll animations. The next thing we want to do is just compile this so it's aware of the updated change. And for testing purposes, we're going to allow our player character to ragdoll on command. So we're going to make it so that if we press a certain key, the player character will ragdoll. To set up new inputs inside of Unreal Engine, we can just close this, open the content drawer, and you want to go over to the input folder and go over to actions. Just right click and go input and select input action. And just call this IA_ragdoll. Then we want to go to the input folder and go over to the IMC_default. This basically stores all of the controls inside of our game. If I double click and open this up, you'll see that there are currently some controls such as jumping, moving, and looking. We're going to create a new control for when we want our player character to ragdoll. Under mappings, I'm going to go add new action mapping. And I'm just going to select the IA_ragdoll that I just made, and I'm going to make it so the player has to press the Z key in order to ragdoll. So here I'm going to look for Z and just select it. Then save this and go over to the third person character, and we're going to go over to the event graph. The event graph is where we code in some logic for how our player character is going to behave. Because we started in the third person template, it already comes with some logic. For example, we have this camera input which controls how our player character's camera is, and we also have this movement and jumping input which controls how my player character moves and jumps. We're going to create a new input for whenever our character wants to ragdoll. So in some free space, if we just right click and look for ragdoll, and then we want to go to this one, enhanced action events, and select IA ragdoll. So this is the ragdoll input that we just made. We're going to make it so when the player presses the ragdoll button, our character will ragdoll. So when we press the Z button, this trigger node is going to fire for as long as we're pressing the Z button. It's just going to fire once off this started node. So what we want to do is just drag in our mesh, just drag off here and look for set simulate physics, and make sure that this is checked. And we can connect from triggered or started. I'm just going to connect from triggered, and we just want to go compile and close this. And now if I was to go play and I press the Z button, my character is going to ragdoll. Although when my player character ragdolls, we can see that we can kind of still move around, and that's a bit weird. So we're going to make it so our player character's capsule will not move around when we ragdoll. If I open up my third person character's blueprint and go to the viewport, this is the capsule, which is what we're moving around when our player character ragdolls. When our player character ragdolls, we're going to make it so the capsule is basically still attached to our mesh. Because when we ragdoll, this mesh kind of like leaves the capsule. So in order to do that, In some free space, we just want to right click and look for event tick. And the way this node will work is every single frame is going to run this event tick. And event tick, if a certain variable is true, then we're basically going to make our capsule collision go towards our mesh. So we're going to go to variables and create a new variable and just call it Ragdoll. And we just want to drag it in and get it and just drag this Ragdoll and look for branch. If this Ragdoll variable is true, what we're going to do is drag in our capsule component and just drag it here and look for set world location. And we're basically going to set it so it's attached to our mesh. So we just want to drag in our mesh, drag off here and look for get socket bone name. And for the socket name, we just want to type in pelvis. So I'll just show you where this is. If I just close this and I go over to my character and to the mannequins and to the meshes and open up the SK Quinn mesh. This is the mesh that we're using. I'm going to go to the skeleton tree, and in the skeleton tree I'm going to look for pelvis. So this bone. Basically, if our character is in Ragdoll mode, we're going to make our capsule collision move towards the pelvis socket inside of our character. From this return value, we're going to look for get. Whoops, I think I grabbed the wrong node. What we want to do is actually drag off here and look for get socket location. And then for the socket name, type in the pelvis and connect this into the location. Then just delete this. Then when we make our character Ragdoll, we're just going to set this Ragdoll variable to be true. That way the capsule collision will follow the player character when they Ragdoll. So just connect this all here, go compile, then close this, and we can test this out. So now if I move around and I press the Z button, my character will start to Ragdoll and my capsule component will move towards the pelvis location on my mesh. Nice. The next thing we're going to do is create some obstacles, and we'll make it so if the player character hits one of these obstacles, they will automatically start ragdolling. So to achieve this, if we open up the content drawer and open up our third person character blueprint again, and before we get started, if we just select all these nodes and press the C button, it will allow us to comment some nodes. This will just allow us to be organized and tell you what the nodes do. So I'm just going to comment this, move capsule component. And if you want to, you can click this show bubble when zoomed, and this will allow you to see what this comment is when you're very zoomed out. And also you can just change the color of this comment if you want to do that. So in order to make it so if my player character hits an obstacle, they'll start ragdolling, we're just gonna right click and look for add custom event and just call this force ragdoll. Then just connect from here into here. And basically we're going to call this force ragdoll custom event whenever my player character hits something. So we can just compile this and close this. Then if we open up the content drawer again, inside of this blueprints folder, I'm going to right click and create a new blueprint. So I'll select blueprint class, select an actor, so an actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. And let's just call this cube underscore BP. And if I open this up, I'm going to go to components and go add, and I'm just going to select this cube. And then if I go to select and scale objects, I'm just going to scale it in the x-axis. And then we just want to select this cube, scroll down, and go to on component hit. So this will basically fire whenever something hits this cube. And on component hit, if this other actor is the third person character, we're going to call the force ragdoll custom event. So I'm just going to drag off other actor and look for cast to BP third person character, because that's what my third person character is. So if my third person character happens to hit this cube, then we can just drag off this BP third person character and call the force ragdoll. So I can just compile this, close this, and then I'm just gonna place this cube somewhere in my level here. And if I go play, and my player character hits this cube, they will force ragdoll. Nice, so with this we have set up a simple obstacle. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is create some more advanced obstacles. In Total Wipeout there are a bunch of obstacles. I've created models for 2 of them and we're going to import them and use them. So if we just open up your content drawer, select content, and then I want you to right click and create a new folder and just call this obstacles. Then head inside of this folder. So attached in this video, I'm going to include a link to some assets. Make sure to download them. And inside of the downloaded file, there should be a model called pitchfork and there should be a model called water. Just select the pitchfork and the sweeper model and just drag and import them into this folder. Click import all and it should import these 2 obstacles. So the next thing we're going to do is set up the obstacles that we just imported. So the first obstacle is going to be the sweeper, and the way it's going to work is it's going to rotate, and if our player character hits any part of this, we'll make them ragdoll. We can just close this, and we're going to be accessing the content drawer quite a lot. So to save time and for convenience, if you go to Window and go Content Browser and select Content Browser 1, this will just make it so it's permanently here and we don't need to keep clicking it. So if we go to the third person folder and to the blueprints folder, we're going to right click, create a new blueprint class, an actor, and just call this the sweeper blueprint. Then if we double click and open this up, we're going to go to components and go add and look for a static mesh. For the static mesh, look for the sweeper static mesh. And in order to make this rotate, we can just go to components and go add and look for rotating movement. Now if I go simulate, we're going to see it's going to start to rotate. And we can control how fast it rotates and the direction it rotates with these values here. So we can make it rotate in the x-axis. I'm not going to do that as it would be a bit weird. So this axis if we wanted to, the y-axis. But for now, you can see that there's a value in the z-axis, which makes it rotate at a rate of 180. If I made this something like 500, then it's going to rotate a lot faster. And if I make this a negative value, then it's going to rotate in the opposite direction. I want to make it a bit dynamic, so each sweeper we place in the level, I want us to be able to control how fast it rotates. In order to do that, we can go to the construction script. The way this will work is it's going to kind of load some settings in our game before we play in it. And what we're going to do is just drag in our rotating movement, drag off here and look for set rotation, and we want this one, set rotation rate. Right click on this and split the structure pin. And we're only concerned with this value in the z-axis, so just right click here and go promote to variable and make sure it's instance editable and expose and spawn. Then go compile and close this. Now if I drag in the sweeper and if I just press the Alt button with this selected, it'll allow me to create a duplicate. I can select the sweeper. Because we made that variable instance editable and expose and spawn, we can control the value of it. So I'll make this, let's say, minus 100, and I'll make this one, let's say, 300. And if I just go simulate, we're going to see they're going to rotate at different rates. Nice. The next thing we need to do is make it so when the sweeper hits the player character, they will start to ragdoll. So if I just open up the sweeper blueprint and just select the static mesh, scroll down, and we're going to code the sweeper and the other obstacle a bit differently because I found sometimes it's not very accurate. So we're going to code it in a slightly different way to how we coded the brick. So for the collision preset, set it to be overlap all. Then if we scroll down and go to on component, we can overlap. If this overlaps with the third person character, so I'll look for cast to third person character, then we will call the ragdoll. Then if we just select the static mesh, right click and go duplicate. And for this duplicated one, for its collision preset, change it to be block all. Then for the collision preset, change this to be custom. So we just want to make sure that this ignores the camera. If we don't, then it can kind of interfere with the camera and make the game look a bit weird. So make sure that this is set to ignore. Then if I go to my third person character, select the mesh and go to collision and make sure generate overlap events is checked, and go to advanced and make sure UCCD is checked and make sure multi-body overlap is checked. The reason we want these checked is because if my player character is hit by an obstacle like the sweeper and they're not moving, then sometimes it makes the game fail to make my player character ragdoll. With these settings checked, it basically always makes sure my player character is checking to see if they've been hit by an object. So make sure that under advanced, those two settings are checked, UCCD and multi-body overlap. So the idea here is this mesh we're going to use to check to see if we've hit the player character. If we do, then we force it to ragdoll, and then the second mesh will basically make our player character move and interact with the sweeper. So we can test this out. I will go play. If I get hit, we can see I ragdoll. You may have noticed the collision of the sweeper is not very accurate. I don't think I was actually hit by its thing and I started to ragdoll. That is because by default, when you import an object into Unreal Engine, it comes with its own collision and it's not very accurate. If I just go to collision and I go add box simplified collision, it's added this box collision. Just select it and delete it, but you'll notice these green little arrows. This basically represents the default collision of this object. And as you can see, it's not very accurate. So to make it a bit more accurate, we can scroll down and under collision complexity, change this to be use complex as simple. You're going to see these lines. These lines basically represent the new collision. Now using this is a bit more expensive, but I think it's worth it because it's not very accurate if we don't have it like this. So we can just go save and close this. And now if I go play, it will be a lot more accurate. So only when I'm actually hit, my character will start to ragdoll. Nice. So with this, we have set up the first obstacle. The next obstacle we're going to set up is going to be the pitchfork, and it's going to work in a very similar way. So I'm going to go to my blueprints, select my sweeper, right click and go duplicate, and I'll just call this the pitchfork blueprint. If I open this up and go to the viewport, I'm just going to change this to be the pitchfork model that I just imported, and I also changed the static mesh one to be the pitchfork model that I just imported. We're going to go to the construction script and just delete this Z variable and this value here, because if I just go simulate, okay, so I'm not sure why it's not working, but basically, we want to make it so that this rotates in the y-axis. If I select one of these meshes, we don't want to rotate this in the z-axis as that would be a bit weird. We want it to rotate in the y-axis. Although you may notice, when we rotate it in the y-axis, the whole model is kind of moving. I only want to rotate this from a certain point so that this kind of is rotating from this point around here. We don't want to rotate the whole model. So to do this, we're going to add another static mesh. So you just click in some free space, then go add and look for cube and just call this the pivot point. Then position this around the end of the fork. So somewhere around here. Then if you select both static meshes, so you can hold the shift button on your keyboard and select these two meshes, then drag them into the pivot point. Now if I select the pivot point and rotate it, then it's going to be a lot more clean and accurate. So this is where we're going to be rotating our mesh from. I'm just going to move mine down a bit. Whoops. So I'm just going to select these two meshes and then move them up a bit. Okay, so to make it so that this is the center of this blueprint, just select this pivot point and drag it into the default scene route. Next, if we go to the construction script, just right click on this rotation rate Y, promote it to a variable, make it instance editable and expose on spawn, compile this, then we can close and test this out. So I'm just going to delete these, drag in my pitchfork, and I'm going to make it have a rotation rate of 50, and let's go play. So we have my pitchfork, it's moving very slowly. Oh, we just need to update its collision because its collision is also a bit inaccurate. So I'll go to my pitchfork and change this to be use complex as simple. And for my pitchfork, I don't want this pivot point to be shown in the game because it's kind of ugly. So we can go to details and look for hidden. And we just want to... This one under rendering, we just want to make sure that hidden in game is checked. And that will hide that mesh. So we can go play. And I can stand in between here. And if it hits me, I will start to ragdoll. Nice. Maybe it's a bit slow, so I can make it, let's say, 120. And I'll move a bit faster, and we have our pitchfork. Nice. So one thing about our current game is when the player character ragdolls, they kind of like can't get back up or recover. So we're going to make a simple checkpoint system so the player character can respawn if they are ever ragdolled. So to do this, if we go over to the blueprints folder, open up the third person character, and in some free space, just right click and look for add custom event, and just call this respawn. So when our player respawns, the first thing we're going to do is drag in our ragdoll variable and set it to be false. That way this event tick thing will not run. Then after we've done this, we want to drag in our capsule component and just drag off here and look for attach component to component. Because when our player character ragdolls, the mesh becomes detached from the capsule component. So we want to reattach it when we respawn. Just drag this into the parent, and for the target, drag in the mesh, and just connect this into target, and connect this into here. We want to make sure everything is relative. Then we want to make sure that our player character is inside of the capsule collision correctly. In order to do this, we just want to drag in the mesh, drag off here and look for set relative location and rotation. Then connect this into here. If you go to the viewport and just select this mannequin character, we can currently see right now the character's relative location and rotation is -89 in the Z and around 270 in the Z axis. So we want to make sure that this has the same values. So for the location, just copy this and paste it here. And for the rotation, just copy this and paste it here. Otherwise, when the player character spawns, they won't be in the correct position. So we can test this all out. Whenever the player character ragdolls, we are going to have a delay of, let's say, 3 seconds, and then we will respawn them. One more thing, when we respawn our player character, we need to make sure that we respawn them at a certain location. So if we just create a new variable, and just call this transform. For the variable type, change this to be transform, and if you just click compile, the transform basically stores a location, rotation, and scale. We just want to drag this in, get it, and then just right click and look for set actor transform, and connect this value into here, and connect this into here. At the start of the game, we're basically going to store our player characters transform, so their scale, location, and rotation. So event begin play, we just want to right click and look for get actor transform, and we'll just set this to be the transform. So this is where we're going to go once we ragdoll. This will help us set up a checkpoint system later on. So if we go compile, save, and close this, and now if I go play, let's say I get ragdolled, so I'm hit by this. In 5 seconds, I should respawn. So 5 seconds, I've respawned here. So with that, we've made a respawn system. The next thing we're going to do is create a checkpoint system. So the player character is going to be able to get to checkpoints, and this will basically save the location of where they're at. That way, in case they hit again, they'll respawn from a safe point. So let's do that. I'm going to right click, go blueprint class, select actor, and I'm just going to call this the checkpoint underscore BP. I'll open it up, and I'm just going to go add and look for a, let's go cylinder. I'm going to make a flag for my checkpoint. If I just go to select and scale objects, make sure that this anchor is unchecked, and then just adjust it so it's kind of like a pole. Then I'm just going to go add, and I'm going to select a cube, and again just adjust this so it's kind of like a flag at the end of this pole. Just going to make my thing a bit thinner, If you want more precise movements over the scaling, you can go here. And if I make this something like 0.03125 on the scale, it'll be a lot smoother to like adjust. By default, I'm going to make sure that this is white, but when the player character gets to a checkpoint, we're going to change the color of this. If we just go add and look for a box collision, add this around the bottom of the flag and just expand it a bit. And with it selected, scroll down and just go to on component begin overlap. On component begin overlap, we're going to check to see if it's the third person character. So I'll cast to the third person character, and then we are going to set their transform. So if we look for the variable, set transform, and we'll just set it to be wherever this flag is. So I'm just going to go add and look for scene, and I'll just call this the respawn point, and just position this slightly in front of the checkpoint flag. Then we just want to drag this in, drag off here, and forget world transform, and connect this into here. And then one more thing, we're just going to make our flag go green if the player character overlaps it. So let me just go to materials here and check to see if there's a green material. So there's this anim sharing green material. So in order to set the material or something, we can just drag in the cube, drag off here and look for set material. And for the material, just look for the green, anim sharing green, and just connect this into here. We can go compile and close this. So I'm just going to drag in my checkpoint. We can see it. If I go play and I go to it, it will become green. And let's say I get hit, I will ragdoll, and then I'll respawn at the checkpoint. Nice. Hello, the next thing we're going to do is create a sprinting system so the player character can sprint. If we go over to the input and go to actions, let's create a new action for when we want our player to sprint. So I'll right click and go input, input action, and I'll just call this IA_sprint. Then if I go over to my IMC default, I will create a new mapping. This will be for the sprint, and I'm going to make it so the player has to press the left shift button in order to sprint. If I go back to my third person character, I am just going to comment this, the respawn, and then in some free space, I'm just going to right click and look for sprint, select this first one, and when I sprint, I am going to drag in my character movement and just drag off here and look for set max walk speed. Now the default max walk speed of the player character is 600. If you go to details and look for walking and go to walk speed, oh sorry, it's 500. So when my player character sprints, I'm going to make it 700. And then when they stop holding the sprint button, I'm just going to copy these nodes and connect from completed into here, and I'll make it 500. So back to the default sprint speed. So if I go compile, close this and go play, if I hold the shift button, my character is going to move faster. I didn't really feel that, so I think I'm going to make it 1,000. This may be a bit too much, but I just want to see. So I feel that if I let go of the shift button, then my character goes back to the speed. So you can play around with how fast you want your player character to be when they sprint. Maybe 1,000 is a bit much, so I'll make it 750. We can compile and save this. The next thing we're going to do is create a timer. So we're going to later on design a level, and I basically want to create a timer to track how fast it takes the player to complete the level. So if we go to the content, we want to right click, create a new folder, and just call this UI for user interface. Head inside here, then right click and go user interface, select a widget blueprint, select user widget, and just call this the timer widget blueprint. We want to double click and open this up, and in the palette just look for a canvas panel. This will create this little square, and this is basically going to be the HUD for our player. I want us to look for a horizontal box and just place this in the top right corner, and also with it selected, just make sure to anchor it to the top right corner. Then we want to look for some text and drag 3 pieces of text into the horizontal box. For this first text, make sure this is variable is checked and just call it minutes. For the second text, just select it and make it those colons. Then for this third text, make sure is variable is checked and just call this seconds. And then for both of these texts, just make them say 00. And let's just adjust the size of it so it's a bit bigger. So I'm going to select all 3 elements by holding shift. Then if I go to font, I'm going to change the size to be 40. Actually, I'm going to make it 80. Yeah, I'll make it 80. Okay, next let's code this so this acts like a timer, which will start counting down when the player is in the game. If we go over to the graph, event construct, this will fire when our timer is shown on the screen. What we're going to do is drag off here and look for set timer by event. Right click on this return value and promote it to a variable and just call this timer event. And for the time, make it 1 and make sure looping is checked. Then just drag off this event and look for add custom event and just call this increase time. So basically every 1 second this is gonna fire. And what we're gonna do is drag in our minutes. Sorry, we want to drag in our seconds first. Get it, then just drag off here and look for set text. And we want this one, set text. Then I want us to create a new variable and just call it min and make it an integer. And then create another variable and just call it sec for seconds. And what we're going to do is just drag in our seconds and just drag off here and look for increment. This will increase the value of this by 1. Then we just want to connect from here into here and then just click this little arrow. I basically want it to display 2 numbers. So for example, if the timer is at 10 seconds, sorry, if the timer is at like 5 seconds, I want it to say 05 instead of just 5. In order to do that, make sure the minimum integral digits is 2. If our second is ever equal to 60, then what we're going to do is just drag off here and look for branch and connect from here into here and from false into here. So we'll keep increasing our seconds as long as it's not equal to 60. If our seconds are equal to 60, then we're just going to drag in our seconds variable and set it to be 0. Then we'll just copy this and paste it here and connect this into text and just click this and also make this 2. Then we will tell the game to increase our minutes by 1. So I will drag in the minutes, get it, and then increment it. Connect this into here, and then I will drag in my minutes text, get it, then drag off here and look for set text, and connect this into here, and this into here, and I'll just click this arrow and make this 2. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is make it so this will appear on the player screen. So to do that, we can go to the third person character, go to event begin play. After we set the transform, we can drag off here and create a widget. That widget is going to be the timer widget blueprint. We want to right click and promote this to a variable and just call this timer HUD. And then we will add this to the viewport. We can compile and close this, then go play. So we can see that this is starting to count up, and once this gets to 60, this should turn to 0, then this should turn to 1. So just to quickly test that out, we can open up the third person character and drag off here and look for set global time dilation. This will kind of speed things up. I'm going to set it to be 40, so basically 40 seconds are going to pass inside of our game. So we go play, we can see it's super fast, and we can see this is counting up. We can delete this. I just wanted to show you that to test that out. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to add equipment slash things to the player character, and then we are going to design our level. So if I go to my content, I'm just going to right click and create a new folder and just call this equipment. Then if we head inside here, briefly close Unreal Engine. As part of the wipeout assets, there's also going to be this helmet model. To drag and import it into this folder, click import. Then if we just go to our characters, go to mannequins, select meshes, and select the SK Quinn mesh. Actually, select the SK Manny mesh because I'm going to change the mesh to be this one. And go to the skeleton tree and look for head. Select this head, right click and go add socket and just call this helmet. Right click and go add preview asset, then select the helmet that we just made. Then if you go here and look for helmet, select it, then you just want to rotate it so it's up 90 degrees. And then if we just go select and translate objects, move this down a bit so it's fitting on our character's head. Then if you go to Windows and Details, this will also allow you to adjust its location, rotation and scale. And just make the scale, I think 0.5 worked well. And just position this so it's on our character's head, because this helmet fits this mannequin a bit better, so that's why I'm using it. Okay, once you've done that, you can just click save. Go to the third person character, to the viewport, and select this mesh, and just change it to be the SK Manny mesh, because the helmet fits this character. And then we just want to, with the mesh selected, go add and look for static mesh, and we can call this the helmet. Then for the static mesh, select the helmet model that we just imported, and for the parent socket, just select the helmet socket that we just made, and this will make the mesh go to that socket. Then we just want to scroll down, and for collision, make it have no collision, otherwise it will kind of like interfere with other things. So go compile, play, and now our character has a helmet. He is ready for our obstacle course. So that's the next thing we're going to do. We're going to create a simple obstacle course for our player character to kind of move around in. So to get started creating this obstacle course, I'm just going to close this, save everything. Okay, once that has done, I'm just going to create a new folder and just call this levels. Then if I go file, I'll go new level and just select the basic, create, and I am going to design a simple wipeout map. So I'm going to design it basically using cubes. So I'm just going to delete this, and we want to go add basics and select player start. So this is going to be where the player is going to spawn in our game. We want to just go add and select a shape. I'll select a cube, and I'm just going to position this underneath my player character, so kind of like this. Before I quickly prototype the level, I'll just give some quick tips that you may know. So we can basically use this to kind of move where objects are. I can change this to be select and rotate to rotate objects. I can change this to be select and scale objects to scale objects. If I was to hold the center one, it would scale everything uniformly if I wanted to do that. And you can adjust how much you can move, rotate, and scale objects by adjusting these settings here. So if I make this 1, I'm going to have a lot more precise movement when I move an object. And when you're designing levels, sometimes it's helpful to adjust the camera speed to move around. So with that, I'm just going to quickly place some blocks. I'm only going to create it using cubes around my level to create a little wipeout map. Okay, so I've roughly blocked out the level. The next thing I'm going to do is add some water, because in Wipeout there's water, and I'm basically going to place this water at the bottom of my level. So if you just select one of your cubes, duplicate it, and just expand it so it covers the whole of your map. So I will quickly just do that. Something like this size should be good. Then once you've done that, just go to the content, create a new folder, just call this textures, head inside here, and then I'm just gonna drag this water and place it here. So we're gonna basically use this as the texture for the floor. Right click on this and go create material, and then just place this here. So we have a water texture for our level, although it looks very stretched, and if I go play, the water is not moving, so it's a bit boring. We're going to make it so this image is a bit less stretched and so that the water actually moves. So if we head inside here, I want you to go to material domain, to blend mode, and just change this to be translucent. Then if you right click and look for constant, and for the value, just make this 0.5 and plug this into opacity. This will make it so the water is not fully opaque, because in real life water is a bit translucent. So you can play around with this value. If I make this something like 0.1, then it's going to be very transparent. If I make this something like 0.9, then it's going to be pretty opaque. So feel free to play around with that, but I'm going to make mine 0.5. The next thing we want to do is look for texture coordinate. This basically allows us to set the resolution of the texture, and we can control its U tiling and its V tiling. So it's basically the texture in the X and the Y. So I am going to make the U tiling 5 and the V tiling 5, and this will basically mean the texture will repeat itself 5 by 5 and kind of stretch out. If I connect this into the UV here, then go apply, you can already see the texture is repeating itself a lot more, and this will just make the texture a bit less stretched out. So you can play around with these values. Maybe 5 is a bit too much, so I'm going to go 2 by 2. Then there's one more thing we can do, and that is make it so the texture moves. To do that, we can just drag off here and look for panner and connect this into here, and you're going to see X speed and Y speed. These basically represents the directions in which you can make the texture move. I'm going to make my move in the Y by 0.5. The higher you make this value, the faster it's going to move. And I'm also just going to make my V tiling like 2.5. Okay. Just make sure to click apply, and then it will start applying these changes. And if I go play, we can see my water texture is a bit translucent and is moving. I think that's very fast, and I did it in the wrong direction. So I'm going to make it 0.1 in the X, and I think I wanted to make this 2.5 and this 2. But feel free to play around with the values. So with this we have some moving water. That looks a bit better. Hello! The next thing I want to do is create some materials for my blocks, because right now they look a bit boring. So to create a new material, just right click, go material, and just call this the red underscore map. Then if I open this up, and if you press the 3 button on your keyboard, then left click, this will create a constant, which is going to be a color. Double click and head inside here, and just change this to be red or a color that you like. Then if you press the 1 button, this will create a constant. And if I make this 1 and just connect this into roughness, actually we want to change this to be 0. This will make the material look kind of sparkly. So in Total Wipeout, the platforms that the players go on kind of look a bit sparkly. So that's why I kind of want the roughness to be 0, but feel free to play around with this value. And I'm also just going to create another material, which is going to be blue. So to save time, I can right click and duplicate this, and I'll just call this the blue matte. Then if I head inside here, oh, okay, seems it didn't copy that. So I'm just going to copy this and paste this here. connect from base into here and from this into roughness. And I'll change the color to be blue. I will apply this. And then just feel free to make certain blocks red, certain blocks blue. That's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so that makes the level look a bit nicer. There's actually one more obstacle that I want to add, which I didn't add, and that is some balls which move up and down. So I remember at the end of Total Wipeout, there are these balls which the player normally has to jump on, which move up and down, and I want to add them, so let's do that. If I go to my blueprints, I'm going to right click, create a new blueprint class, select actor, and just call this ball underscore blueprint. If we open this up, I'm just going to go add and look for a sphere. And we just want to make sure this anchor is checked, and let's make it like 4. Then if I go to my event graph, event begin play, I'm just going to drag off here and look for add timeline. We want to connect this to play, and basically a timeline allows us to basically make things happen across a certain timeline. And what we're going to do is make it so this ball will move up and down. Head inside here. If we go add new track, select float track, and just click this loop, this will just make it so the timeline will basically always continue looping. And just right click and go add key to curve float, and at time 0 have a value of 0. Right click again, and at time 2.5, so halfway along the timeline, have a value of 1. Then right click again, add a key to curve float, and around time 5 you want to have a value of 0 again. Then if we just select this curve here, right click and go auto, select this curve here, right click and go auto, this will make the timeline smoother. Then if we go back to the event graph, we want to drag in our sphere, and just drag off here, and look for set world location. Right click here and go split structure pin. We're only concerned with the sphere's location in the z-axis because we'll make this move up and down. And what we're going to do is just drag off this new track and look for lerp and connect alpha into here. I'm going to tell you what to do next and then explain how this works next because they'll be a bit easier. Drag off this sphere and look for get world location. Right click, split the structure pin, and you want to get the z value, and you just want to subtract, let's say 10, and connect this into A. Then drag off here and look for add, and add 10, and connect this into here, and connect this return value into Z. And then for this X and Y, we just want to connect from here to here, and from Y to here. So the way this lerp node will work is it'll basically switch between value A and value B. It will switch between value A and B depending on the alpha. So if this alpha is 0, then it's going to make sure it has value A. If this alpha is B, if the value of this alpha is 1, then it's going to make sure that this value is B, and this will be fed into here. So basically what we're doing is whenever our timeline is at 0, we are going to make the sphere basically move -10 in its z-axis, and whenever it reaches 1, we're going to make it move +10 in its z-axis. Just connect this into update, and this will make sure that this happens smoothly over a timeline that we have just made. Before we get started, if we just drag off event begin play, look for delay, right click and promote this to variable, make it instance editable and expose on spawn. Go compile, and I'm just going to do one thing. I'm going to add and look for cylinder, and I'm just going to add a cylinder which comes out of the ball. So I'll just do that now. And then I'm just going to attach this cylinder to the sphere. So it's a child of the sphere. That way when this moves, the cylinder will move with it. We can close this. And let me just add my ball here. I'll probably need to adjust the size of this as it's looking a bit small, but we can just test this out for now. And if I go simulate, you can see it's moving up and then it moves down. So it moves up and then it moves down. Maybe I made the value a bit too high, so I'm just gonna adjust some settings. I'll make the ball a bit bigger, and I'm probably gonna make this 2. So I'm just going to do that quickly now. So I'm happy with this. I made it move by 2. when it moves up and down, and I'm just going to copy and make 3 of these. And I'm going to make this middle one have a delay of, let's say, 2.5 seconds. That way it's not in sync with the other ones. That's the reason I added that delay. And while I'm here, I'm just going to make this red. And I'll just expand my map out a bit. And then one thing I forgot to do is basically make it so that these are rotating. So make sure to add some rotating values here. So I'll make this like 100. I can make this minus 100. And I'll just make this, let's say 50. For the second one, I'll make it minus 50. And for this third one, I will make it 50. That way I have all the obstacles in my level working. There's one thing that I didn't do, and that is to make it so that we can finish our wipeout and level. So we're going to do that now. I'm just going to create another platform for the end here, and then I'm going to create a new blueprint. I'll make it an actor, and I'm just going to call this the Podium blueprint. And when my player gets to the Podium blueprint, I'll tell them that they have basically been in the game. So I'm going to add a cube. I'm going to flatten it. And then I am just going to make another cube and make its dimensions a bit less and make it stick out a bit. Then I'm going to have one more cube and I'll make its dimensions a bit less. And then we can basically just go add and look for box collision. And basically we'll make it so when the player overlaps this box, they basically be in the game. So if we scroll down and go to on component begin overlap, we will cast to the third person character. We will get the timer HUD. From here we can basically reference the variable that we made inside of the timer HUD. So if you remember, we made this variable called timer event. When we get to the podium, we will get the timer event and just drag off here and look for clear and invalidate timer by handle. This will stop the timer event from running. Then after that happens, we can basically tell the player their final time and score. So here in the palette, I am just going to look for text, and I'm going to anchor this to the center, and I'll just make this a final score. And I'm actually going to just look for a horizontal box and move this final score text inside of here. And then I'm just going to copy this text I made here and paste it inside of this horizontal box. And I'm basically going to make this display my player's final score. So if we go to the graph, we can just right click and look for add custom event and just call this final score. And what we're going to do is drag in the minutes and drag in the seconds. Sorry, we want to drag in the new minutes text, so this is called minutes ones, and this is called seconds one. We want to drag in both of these new things, and just set the text. And we'll set the text of the seconds to be whatever our seconds is, and make sure that this is on 2, and that we do this first. And then we will do the same for the minutes. So I will just drag in my minutes, connect this here, and make this 2. And connect this into here. I'm just going to adjust this so it's the same size, so 80. And I don't want this visible all the time, so just anchor this to the center, and then for the visibility, make it hidden. This will make it so it's not visible. And then when we get the final score, I'm just going to make it so we can see this. So if you just select the horizontal box, make sure it is a variable, and just call this final score box. And when we call the final score custom event, we can drag in the final score box, get it, then set the visibility of this to be visible. And then one more thing, we're just gonna create a couple of buttons. So I drag in the vertical box, and I just anchor this towards the bottom, and then I look for a button and just drag this into the vertical box, and then I will add another button to the vertical box, then look for some text and just place these on both buttons. And for this first text block, I kind of want there to be a gap between both buttons. So if I go to the padding, and for the bottom, I'll add a padding of 50, and that'll make there a bit of a gap. And we just want this first text to say retry, so we'll allow the player to retry the level. Or we can make it say quit, and we can make quit the game. For this vertical box, just make sure it is a variable, and we can just call this buttons. And we will also just show this buttons when we call the final score. And by default, we want this to be hidden. So here, I'm gonna look for visible and make sure that this is hidden. So with this, we can test this out. So if I just go to my podium, after I do this, I am gonna drag off my timer HUD and call the final score. We can compile this, and I'm just gonna make my podium red. And now let me just drag in my podium. So I'll just place it here. And I've just removed my player start, so I just spawn wherever my camera is. So if I go play, if I go here, we can see it says my final score is 2 seconds, and then I can retry and quit. Nice. Currently, right now, my mouse isn't showing, so I can't click the retry or quit button. And in the final section, we're going to create a main menu, and then we'll make the mouse cursor appear. Then we'll come back here and make the mouse cursor appear when this final score shows on the screen. Hello guys, so I've updated my level a bit. I've made all the platforms touch the floor as it looks a bit better, and I've also added a barrier around my level. Although I kind of still think this looks a bit ugly, there's one kind of trick that we can do to make the level look a bit better. So if I just select my exponential height fog and go to the fog height fall off, to the fog density, and I make this something like 2, this will make the fog in my level a lot thicker and kind of like hides the outskirts of my level, which I think makes the level look a bit prettier and nicer. So I've just done those 2 things to make my level look a bit more nicer for this prototype game. Okay, so there's another issue I want to address. Right now, if the player character just jumps off, nothing happens, and it's kind of a bit weird. So we're going to add a kill volume. So if the player character, for example, falls off the map, they will instantly ragdoll. My fog's kind of getting in the way of my level, so what we can do is just use this eye icon, and that will hide the fog from our level. So I'm just going to go add, and we go basics, and just select trigger box, and just expand this trigger box across the whole of your map. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm going to change this to be 1, so it just expands a bit faster. Okay, so once you've placed your trigger volume across your map, just make sure it's selected in the outlier. Then just go to here and go open level blueprint. So inside of Unreal Engine, levels can have blueprints. And if you just right click and go to the add event, make sure your trigger box is selected. Go to collision and go add on activity and overlap. What we're going to do is cast to the third person character and then call the Ragdoll. Then if I just compile this, close this and go play. Whoops, so I removed the player start. So if I just start here and I go play, and let's say I fall off, when I hit the ragdoll, when I hit the trigger box volume, my character automatically ragdolls, and then I respawn. That way the player can safely fall off of the map. Nice. The next thing I want to do is add a title screen, and then we'll basically be done. So to create this title screen, I'm going to go to my level sorter, just go File, go New Level, We can just select empty because we're not going to need anything in our title screen. Go save. And go to the levels folder and just call this title. So we need to create a main menu. So I'm just going to right click, go user interface, select widget blueprint, user widget, and I'll call this my main menu, widget blueprint. If I open this up, I'm going to my palette and I'm going to look for a canvas panel. I'll drag it in, then I'll look for some text, and then I will just, I will just anchor this to the top, and we can just call this Unreal Engine Wipeout. I will make the size of it, let's say 100. And then I'm also going to look for an image. Then if we just select and drag this image into the canvas panel, then select the image, and for the anchor, select this one in the bottom right, and then for all of its values, make them 0. And this will make the image stretch across the whole of the screen. For the Z order, make it -1. So whatever has a higher Z order will basically be positioned on top. I can't really see my text, so I'm going to change the color of this to be, let's make it this light blue. The next thing we're going to do is create a basic menu. So inside of this palette, let's look for a vertical box. Drag it in. Then for this vertical box, I'm going to look for a button and place 2 buttons inside of this vertical box. Then I'm going to look for some text and place some text on top of my buttons. This first text, let's make it say play. And the second text, let's make it say quit. And for this first button, I'm going to just add a padding of 50. And then I am also just gonna anchor this to the center of the screen. And let's just make the text of these a bit bigger. Okay, if we just select this play button, scroll down and go on clicked. On clicked, we just want to drag off here and look for open level by object reference. And the level I'm going to open is going to be the wipeout map that I made. Then if I go to quit, I can scroll down and just click it. When I click this button, I will just quit the game. I can then compile this and close this. I will go to my level blueprint. And then begin play, I'm going to create a widget, which is going to be the title. Sorry, I called it the main menu. And then we will add this to the viewport. Then if I go compile, save, we can test this out. It will show me my Unreal Engine wipeout, although there are a couple of problems. We can see this countdown timer, and if I just click somewhere with my mouse, it disappears and then it never appears again. So we need to fix this. The reason the timer is basically showing is because inside of this level, it's spawning in the third person character. Because we started this game in the third person template, it's assuming that for this level, I want to start with the third person character. In order to basically set the correct game mode for the level, we can go window and then world settings. And then here we can select the game mode. If you go to the blueprints folder, you can you can see that there is this third person game mode. Currently there's none, so it's just going with the default game mode, which is the third person game mode, which spawns in our third person character. So we need to create a new game mode for our main menu. So I'm just going to right click, go blueprint class, select game mode base, and just call this the main menu game mode. We don't need to code anything inside here, just drag it to here, and this will just make it so we don't spawn in as any character. The next thing we need to do is go back to our main menu, and event construct, we just want to right click and look for get player controller. Just drag off here and look for set game UI. Sorry, we want set UI, and we want this one set input mode UI only. And then just drag off here and look for set show mouse cursor, and make sure this is checked. Then compile this, close this, and now if I was to go play, I can click as many times with my mouse and there's no timer. If I click play, it will take me to my wipeout map. I've just not clicked play because I never added a player start to my wipeout map. I've removed it. If we go back to the wipeout map and to the UI folder, open up the timer widget blueprint. When we get to the final score and we do this, we're just going to right click and look for get player controller, drag off here and set the input mode to be UI only. Then we will show our mouse cursor. So I'll look for set show mouse cursor, and I'll make sure that this is checked. Then we can compile this, and then we just want to go over to our third person character. And for them, on event begin play, before we do all of this, we just want to right click and get the player controller and just drag off here and for set input game only. And we want to make sure the mouse cursor is not being shown when we're playing as the third person character. So drag off here and for set show mouse cursor and make sure that this is just unchecked. Then connect all the nodes here. And I'm just going to go to my player start and expand it out a bit so it's like this. And then I'm just going to go here and go add and go basics and select a player start. So now I can save this, go to my maps. Whoops, I want to go to my title map. If I go play, we can see the Unreal Engine wipeout. I can click play, it will take me to my wipeout level and I can start playing it. So there's one final thing we need to do, and that is just make it so you can export the game so you can share it with other people. So in order to export a game, you just want to go edit, then go to project settings, then go to maps and modes, then go to the game default map and just change this to be the map where you want the player to start the game in. For us, we want it to be the title level that we made. And you can also just change here the map that you'll start in when you load up your Unreal Engine project. So I may change this to be the wipeout map in case I want to change it in the future. Once you've done all of this, you're going to need to install Visual Studios. If you don't have Visual Studios, you won't be able to export the game. And then once you've installed Visual Studios, you should have the option to go here to platforms, then go Windows, and then you can select package project. It will ask you where you want to package your project. Just select where and then it'll start exporting. So I'm going to do that. So my package has finished exporting. Once it does that, it should be in this Windows folder. If we open it up and just select it, I have another package project, so you can just ignore that. If I double click and open up, so my project is called Wipeout, so my game's called Wipeout. If I go play, I will start in my Wipeout map, and let's just play. So I'm holding shift, so I run slightly faster. And I kind of positioned this badly, so I could update that. Then I have this bit. This is going to be kind of tricky, I think. I'll go to the edge here, and then, yes, okay, I made it, but then I fell off. But I made it to the checkpoint, so we're all good. Then this bit, okay, let's go. Okay, kind of failed there. Oh, that was very bad of me. Let's try. Okay, I'm struggling with this. I made these very slow. I think I should have made these a bit faster because they're a bit too easy, but that's good for me, I guess. Then we're at the final point, which is these balls. So let's go. I never actually tested these, so hopefully they're correct, good enough. Okay, so we got here. Oh, okay, I made it. Nice. And I go here, it says final score 259, and then my character kept moving because I think he's locked, but I can click retry if I want to retry. I will close this project. If I go to my UI folder here, and I will select the retry button, on clicked, let's make it open level by name. Whoops, sorry. We want to open level by object reference, and that level will be the wipeout map. And then if we get quit, we will just quit the game. So I can drag off here and go quit game. And then one more thing, in order to make it so the player character doesn't lose control when they go to the podium, if we open up the UI and go to the timer widget blueprint, the reason the player character loses control when they get to the podium is because we set the input mode to be UI only, so the player character can no longer control the keyboard. And the last thing I did was move forward with my character, then it switched to UI mode only, so I couldn't control my player character anymore. So instead of doing this, just delete it and drag off here and look for set, input, game and UI only. That way I can still control the player character and I can also interact with menus. We can just compile and save this. And now we have our wipeout map. So that's all for this course/tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot. If you could like and subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.